सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति There are two questions. We'll repeat the question. First question is, in one of the recent classes was mentioned there are many levels of tapas. Can you elaborate on those levels, please? So the first question is that I had in passing mentioned on tapas. So, and I had basically said there are many levels. So the question is to elaborate what does this levels of tapas mean? And the second question that has also come up is what is the relevance of Brahmacharyam? We took that also as a topic, just mentioned it in the previous classes. So I'm going to do these questions. Actually, if you shorten the question will be what is tapas and what is the relevance of Brahmacharyam? Brahmacharyam is also part of tapas, is a form of tapas. So first I will take up only tapas and try and do it a little exhaustively because it is a very important aspect of spiritual growth. Without tapas, Shastra says there is no growth. One of the verses is Tapasa Chiyate Brahma. It's from the Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, if I'm not mistaken. Tapasa Chiyate Brahma. With tapas, Brahmaji Chiyate, he expanded. He expanded, and the verse continues, means implying that he created this world with tapas. Brahmaji being the creator, he created the world with tapas. And tapas meant expansion. The literal meaning here is knowledge. But the word tapas, it basically, if you look at the dictionary, it just means, comes from the word tap. Tap is heat. Tapna. Heat. So heat would imply fire. So fire brings heat. So tap fundamentally, dictionary wise, means something which gives, heats up. What does it heat up? What is its actual meaning? While the general meaning is heat, word meaning is heat. What does the meaning of the word imply? Translate. Heat is just another word. What does this meaning imply? To do that, first and foremost, I'm going to take up the subset of this question. What is the need for tapas? What is the relevance of tapas? What is the significance? Why? What is the necessity for tapas? Tapas क्यों करना चाहिए? Tapas क्यों कहा गया है? What is tapas? To understand what is tapas, what is the context of tapas? To understand the context of tapas, I am bringing you people to a verse very popular in our general knowledge, which is from the Kathopanishad. The analogy that you get from Kathopanishad. One second, let's go ahead and can you see the verse? This is the verse from Kathopanishad, which is giving us the analogy of the famous chariot example of Arjuna and Krishna. We've all seen on the Mahabharata war, there were 5 horses. Most of the photographs or they show 4 horses, but it is implying there are 5 horses, and Krishna is the Sarthi. Arjuna is sitting at the back, who is the one who is sitting on the chariot, and there is a physical chariot. We have all heard of this. This analogy actually comes from Kathopanishad. Kathopanishad, you remember just a few classes before we mentioned, is the story of Nachiketa. And in this analogy, I'm bringing the verse here. The verse says, Atmanam Rathinam Vidhi. Vidhi means know. Know the charioteer. Rathinam, Rathi. Rathi ko Atmanam. Atma is the Rathi, the charioteer. Know the charioteer to be Atma. Shariram Ratham Evatu. A charioteer obviously seated on a chariot. The chariot, Ratham, chariot, Eva, Vidhi Eva. Know the chariot to be Sharira, the body. The body is the chariot, physical body of humans is the chariot. Indeed, tu is indeed. Know the charioteer, the one who's in the chariot, living in the chariot. The one who's living, who's sitting on the chariot is the Rathi, which is Atma. Here Atma means Jivatma, don't get confused, just take it as Atma as the word says. Body is the chariot. Buddhim tu Sarathim. Buddhi of the person, the one who is the charioteer, uski jo buddhi hai, that is the Sarathi. Sarathi is the one who is holding the reins of the horses. He is conducting where the chariot goes. He is directing the horses to go wherever he wants them to go for the sake of the Sarathi, for the sake of the Rathi. So Sarathi is the one who is, say, the driver. So the car in the modern context, car example, the outer body of the car is this physical body. The driver seated in front is the Sarathi. Upanishad says this Sarathi is the Buddhi in you. Is that thinking, discerned thinking. Remember, Buddhi means Viveka Buddhi. The discerned thinking. Sarathi, major capacity to think hai. The Rathi major capacity to think hai, that is the Sarathi. Vidhi, know that also. Manaha prakraham evacha. Whereas the mind of the person is the reins of the horses, is the steering wheel in the present context. So what are the things said here? Body is the chariot, physical car. The person sitting behind the owner of the car, he is the enjoyer of the car. He owns it. Whole of it is his own. the one who lives in it, that is Atma, the whole composite you. Buddhi is your Sarthi, the one which decides where you should be going. And mind is the reins, the steering wheel. This, he says further, Indriyani hayanahuhu vishayagum teshu gochara. The Indriyas, senses, are the ones that move towards the respective sense objects. The Indriyas are the horses. Horses are actually running on the roads. भागते हैं, जिस मार्ग पे वो भागते हैं, the analogy is equating marg to sense objects and indriya to senses. तो घोड़े मार्ग पे ही भाग सकते हैं. तो इंद्रिया अपने सेंस ऑब्जेक्ट की तरफ ही खिंचती है, जाती है, चलती है उसमें. आत्मा इंद्रिया मनोयुक्तम. आत्मा इंद्रिय मनः युक्तम, युक्त होके, joined together. The one who has integrated the Atma means the one who was the Rathi, Indriya and the Man. इंद्रियों और मन को जो जोड़ के रखा है, that Atma is called the Bhokta, the enjoyer, by the wise, Manishinaha, by the wise. So who is called enjoying is the one whose mind and senses have been joined together, means they are aligned. They move together. For the person, he enjoys his journey. In other words, in the present context, if our driver has his steering wheel well in his hand and has the road map of where to go and drives well, then the sitting one is enjoying the ride. When do you enjoy life? You enjoy life when your buddhi is able to direct the mind and the senses which otherwise move towards their own respective places. But if the sarthi, means the intellect, the buddhi, is strong in a person, he keeps the reins and the horses together. कहते ना लगाम छोड़ दी, हिंदी की शायद मुहावरा है ये, उसने बहुत लंबी लगाम छोड़ दी. Means he left the reins too loose and therefore the horses have gone here and there. If the controller hasn't got control of his mind, hasn't got the control of his senses, if the driver doesn't have control on his steering wheel, the one who sits at the back cannot enjoy the ride, cannot enjoy what the world has to offer, will have a bumpy ride, will have bumpy experiences. Now, why is this essential to understand? Because in Katha Upanishad later, let me bring this page up. Can you read this or should I magnify it? I think I should magnify it a bit. Yeah. Okay. Have I missed something? Yeah. A later portion of the Kathopanishad says, Paranchi Khani Vyatranat Swayambhu. Swayambhu is another name for Brahmaji. The first statement I made is, Brahmaji created the world with tapas. This portion says, Brahmaji, Swayambhu, he made the body in such a way, Paranchi Khani, Parang Pashyati na Antara Atman. He says, Vyatranat, these senses, organs, Brahmaji has designed them in such a way that they only move outward towards their respective sense objects. Horses move on their paths, on the roads, marg. The senses, therefore, na antar atman, they don't look within. They can't see within. There is in normal today's language, I will say, there is a defect in design. Means the design has limitation. The design has limitation means senses are limited to see only what is outside of them. The senses cannot see what is inside. Na antaratma. But kaschat dhiraha, someone who is a dhira purush. Dhira means the one who has धीरता. धीर है, गंभीर है, धीर है, steadfast, persistent, concentrated. The one who is, जो भी पुरुष लेकिन जो धीर है, what does he do? He, desiring his own amaratvam, means his own eternal nature, desirous of knowing who he is, who is inside, desirous of knowing his own amaratva nature, जो मरता नहीं है. Amar means which has no death. Desiring to know which has no death. What does this dhira purusha do? How has he become dheer? He does chakshuhu adi, all the indriyas, he aikshavat avritta chakshuhu, he withdraws, he controls. Chakshuhu adi, his senses. When does he control the senses? When he is desirous of knowing who he really is. Rathi, the one who's sitting in this chariot, who's now experiencing the world. By defect means we are calling it defect only for understanding. By design is the right word. By design, senses only move outward. That's by design. But because they cannot see within, this desirous person controls the senses. And here comes the context of tapas. Why is tapas necessary is what I said. Before I tell you what is tapas, I want to first make you, I want us to probably, I want to understand myself. What is the need for tapas? What is the context of tapas? Tapas is a very general term. मगर tapas की जरूरत क्यों है? And then you will understand what is tapas. For the person who recognizes that indriya, senses are defunct, they are not a praman. Senses, knowledge of the senses is useless, is invalid. To know who you are, the knowledge acquired through senses, gained through senses, is useless to know who you are. Therefore, the Dhira Purusha starts to control the senses. And this is what we said is the context of tapas. Now, to control the senses, as many people, so many can there be tapas. All of us have different weaknesses in our senses, different grades. We have different levels of weaknesses. We have different strength of weaknesses in this stuff. Some have more, some have less. Except tapas will vary accordingly. So what is tapas, in other words? Is anything that you undertake to keep yourself in the pursuit of the knowledge of yourself and preventing the dissipations in the process. To prevent the dissipation, whatever you do becomes tapas. This is general. In the Gita, I'm going to share another screen right away. Has the Bhagavad Gita screen come? Come up. Okay, great. In the Bhagavad Gita, and this is where actually both the questions have joined, Brahmacharyam and Tapas, but I'm still going to take them a little differently. In the Bhagavad Gita, there is a verse in 18th chapter. This is not that verse, it's in 18th chapter, which is telling in the context of someone asking a question that to know yourself, you must give up all actions. That is tapas. Means you must just give up everything, every other pursuit. You must give up all actions. To answer that, Krishna gives a verse in 18th chapter, 5th verse. And the verse is, Yajna Dana Tapah Karma. Yajna Dana Tapah Karma. Na Tyajyam Karyam Eva Etat. Yajna Dan Tapaswale Karam. Na Tyajyam. Do not give them up. On the contrary, Karyam Eva Etat. Do them. So just before, there is a discussion to say, should we control everything, give up all pursuits of life to know ourselves? Some people say yes, all actions should be given up. Excuse me. And some say, Krishna says, some say, Yajna Dana Tapas should not be given up. And here Krishna verifies to say that Yajna, Dana and Tapas should not be given up. Not only not given up, they should be done. Why? Because the second line is Yajna, Danam, Tapaha cha eva. These three kinds of actions, Pavanani, they are purifiers. they bring about purification of the person. Remember, we are on the process of Viveka, Vairagya, Samadhi, Shatka, Sampatti, Mumukshutvam. What are these? Qualifications, purifications. He says these three kinds of actions, on the contrary, Manishinam is the last word. The wise say, through these three actions, you purify yourself. Yajna means capacity to worship, physical worship, mental worship. Dan means capacity to share, not over hoard. Share your benefits at every level, not just physical, but these are actions, so it's a very general thing. He says, I'm taking from the question of the context. Tapas is a purifier. You may remove the other two because we're not in discussion of yajna and dan here. What is tapas? Tapas is a purifier. It purifies. Then when I said the statement, there are levels of tapas. What I really meant was, there are many, of course there are various grades of tapas from each person to their own. As I just said, to your capacity, to your weaknesses. But there are, Shastra has to somewhere classified them according to two categories. One category is by your physical instruments, your body, your capacity to act, your capacity to talk intelligently, speech, a continuous speech, a willful speech, and your capacity to think, thoughts. So Shastra says, employing all the three becomes, employing all the three at the physical level, you can do tapas. At the speech level, you can do tapas. And at the mind level, you can do tapas. Tapas can be done at all three levels. Now, at the physical level, what is called tapas? 17th chapter, 14th verse. One second. Yeah, 17th chapter. We'll forget that. He says, what is physical tapas? Deva Dvija Guru Pragnya Pujanam. Worshipping gods. Dvija is a very technical word for those who have taken the initiation, when they had that Upanayanam ceremony and they took initiation of learning the sacred texts. They were called Dvija, means twice born. Those who have one, a physical birth, and second, the intellectual birth, where they are put in the pursuit of mental growth. Dvija, learned, in other words. Guru is Guru. Pragnyaha, again, wise people, those who know. Pujanam means worship, means just the capacity to worship, because forget all the other three, but Deva Puja, we all know is how tedious it is to the body. It's not easy. And when you go to certain religious places and you see people doing all kinds of austerities, you really wonder if all this is necessary for spiritual growth. All people do all kinds of things. Shastra explains to us this worship, along with, it's not just worship, Chaucham, purification, Arjavam, Arjavam means being upright, being straightforward. This being straightforward, upright, then Brahmacharyam, Brahmacharya, and Ahimsa, non-violence. These are called Shariram Tapa Uchyate. Uchyate is कहना, called. तप जो शरीर के लेवल पे हो रहा है, this is called tapas at the body level. Then Anudvega ka next verse. Anudvega karam vakyam means speaking such a language, ऐसा कहना, words, using your words, sentences, vakyam, using those sentences, anudvega karam. Here Shankara very nicely puts it as प्राणिनाम अनुदुःख karam. किसी को दुख नहीं दे रहा. Your vakya is in such a way, your statements, your language that you use is such that it doesn't give sorrow, unhappiness, grief to someone. It doesn't disturb someone. The language you speak does not cause sorrow to someone. It's not hurtful. Not only is the language not hurtful, satyam, it is also truthful. Means you're not deceitful, you don't lie, you don't flatter, you don't talk vain, your language means your control of your language, your speech is so much or is such that you speak in a way that it always is truth and is never the cause of unhappiness. Not only that, it is priya hitam. It is priyam, pleasant, pleasurable to hear. People look forward to when you open your mouth, they want to listen. What are you saying? Hitam, it is in the benefit of the other. It has hit. किसी का हित हो रहा है तुम्हारे बोलने से. अगर किसी का नुकसान हो रहा है, किसी को दुख हो रहा है, किसी को परेशानी हो रही है, किसी को इंजरी हो रही है, किसी को हर्ट हो रहा है, then even if you want to say it, you don't say them. Cha yat, which, yat means which. So those vakyas, वो कहना, वो भाषा आपकी, that language of yours, which is truthful, which is pleasant, which is beneficial, and which does not give sorrow to someone. Not only that, swadhyaya abhyasanam, that constant habit of reading your scripture. Swadhyaya, I mentioned in the previous class, Swa-adhyaya. In the olden days, everybody had their own Vedic shakhas to recite. So that recitation was a part of the day's habits, a day's activity. It was a habitual activity. You had to do them. There was no choice there. So what I want to point over here is that Swadhyaya Abhyasanam means that constant recitation of one's own shakha. In today's terms, it's recitations in the form of verses or whatever. Sundarkand, and a lot of people do a lot of things. Vishnu Sahasranama, Ramayana, anything, but you're using your speech. It's not reading it. It's not understanding it. It's at the level of just saying it. It's just reciting it. My joke over always is, instead of reciting Baba Black Sheep, have you any wool, which is also a recitation, you're reciting, say, the Gayatri Mantra. So you're using the same speech, but the outcomes of the two will be entirely different in your life. So how is organ of speech utilized by the person. Depends on the person because it's your willful action. Vangmayam tapa uchyate. That is called tapas at the level of your speech. Vangmaya. It is control of your speech. Tapas of your speech is the word. As I said, there are some words in Sanskrit which have absolutely zero translation, and any translation I have come to understand over the years of understanding the subject is only misleading sometimes, very often rather. The minute I say tapas and I substitute the word with control, control gives another connotation to our mind. Both are involving voluntary will. Tapas is that which you have discerned and decided that this is the criteria. So even if someone has hurt you, you have two choices at that time. Take the Ratha example. Senses are bound to go outward. Your first choice will be someone hurts you. You will want to, okay, not first time, they continue to hurt you. The 10th time, the 15th time, you will say, bas, enough. And you will also afterwards, all the 10-15 times का जो रोक के रखा था वो 16th time पे equivalent हो गया. इससे अच्छा first time ही कह देते तो शायद better होता. It wouldn't have built up so much. So now what happened over here? The person understands that you are being hurt. You are getting hurt. You are on the receiving end, say. Someone's hurting you by their words. Indiscriminate usage of words. When do we hurt someone? When we have no discrimination of what is to be said, to when is it to be said, to whom is to be said, which somewhere in a societal upbringing had a lot of controls infused in the previous days because of the goals not being materialistic so much. In today's times, the emphasis has been on freedom of speech. The emphasis is on freedom of the personality. Therefore, it is very likely that everyone is hurting everyone. Very, very likely that even if I say someone's hurt me, it is unlikely that I have not hurt someone. Now, why? Because the context of how to measure what is to be said, that hitakari part, has got lost somewhere as a control to us, I prefer to use word discipline because they are both equally bad words though, but whatever, as long as you're getting the idea. Vangmayam tapas means that you fulfill these criteria. They may all be fulfilled, any one of them could be fulfilled. Doesn't matter. Means supposing someone's hurt me, to complete the example, someone's hurt me, I have a choice whether I rebuke back, I insult back, because that's natural for the senses. Remember the analogy of the Ratha and the Paranchi Khani verse. Naturally, my senses will want me. There'll be a push from inside to say, give it back. If I give it back, I may get that time moment of peace and happiness and whatever, satisfaction, whatever be the outcome. But what is tapas? Yes, that person said some things to me which have hurt me. My saying these things are also going to hurt the person. My choosing not to say them, even if I'm justified to say them, has become tapas. Because I have involved a choice, a willful action I have taken in the criteria that will help me tomorrow to know who I am. Because remember, tapas is only a purifier. Tapas will purify. So whether I do it at the physical level or oral level or both the levels or any level, doesn't matter. These are two. Then there is the third, I said, manasa. What is mind tapas? Mental tapas. It is manah prasadaha samyatvam. Manaprasadaha. Manaprasadaha means pleasant. Mind is calm. जब प्रसाद को प्रसाद के जैसे लेते हैं तो it's like happiness. It always remains in a kind of a आनंद में रहता है. Saumya. It is gentle is the translation here. It is pacified. It's saumya. It has a grace. Maunam. Knowing when to keep quiet. Maintaining quietude. Silence. Not physical. Mentally, I am shant. Silence does not mean no thoughts. Silence means my thoughts are not disturbing me. Just as I watch a movie, my thoughts may continue, but I'm in peace. I'm silent. I'm not acting upon them. My thoughts don't ruffle me, buffle me. My thoughts don't make me anxious. My thoughts do not propel me to jump into doing something. That's called maunam. So one maunam that everybody understands is at the level of speech. ना बोलना लगता है मौन है, मगर अगर ना बोल के आपके मन में आप उसको बहुत कुछ कह रहे हो, that is not maunam. So supposing I controlled at the level of the speech, but at the level of the mind, I'm giving it back left, right, and center. As long as the other person is not listening, or I have put a pillow on my face and I'm on the pillow so that the other person doesn't hear. Now, just because the other person hasn't heard and nobody has heard and only the pillow has heard and the pillow cannot say anything back to me, therefore I get my own peace that I have said it also. Even if I keep quiet, it's like, but in my mind is going somersaults because I'm not saying a word and my external demeanor may be very quiet. A lot of people who are turbulent inside have a very quiet demeanor outside. It's a very deceptive thing sometimes. There's a huge level of projection that gets put up. So you just feel कि अरे इंसान कितना शांत है, but अंदर उसका दिमाग खूब चल रहा है. That's not maunam. So maunam is not when you are externally not talking. Maunam has come in manasa tapa. It's a mental tapas. Atma vinikraha. You control yourself by yourself, not because someone tells you to do it. Atma means oneself. Vinikraha means I withdraw my senses by my own self. Bhava samshuddhihi iti etat tapaha manasam uchyate. These constitute bhava shuddhihi, samshuddhihi. Means emotional purity is the translation here. अपनी भावनाओं में शुद्धि लाना. Means I cannot think ill of anybody. I cannot think bad of someone. So even if I am on the face not saying anything, or I am saying I am all fine with you, but inside I am cursing the person, not letting the person know. So it's not maunam. Not only that, I am developing raga dvesha for the person. Dvesha in this context of example. I'm beginning to dislike the person because the person said something to me, etc. So that dislikes and that envies and everything that goes on in a normal mind is all called mala, impurity. Raga dvesha kama krodha moha mada is the impurity. So but natural, what is shuddhi? Shuddhi is not having that raga dvesh in your mind. Not having dislike for someone, etc. This is emotional purity. These constitute manasa tapas. This is mental tapas. Not only this now, there is still further gradation that Shastra gives us of tapas based on the composition of each person. And that composition I said in the previous class, you will do it in Tattva Bodha further, but It is sattva, rajas and tamas, the gunas that each one is made up of. Further, tapas can be sattvic tapas, rajasic tapas, tamasic tapas. So your tapas, you see the permutation combination. It can be, my maths is 0. Therefore, someone please do the permutation combination, let me know. 3 kinds of tapas at the level of gunas, sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, and 3 at the level of equipments, body, speech, and mind. So you can have any of the permutation combination of tapas. Sattvic tapas can be at the level of mind, it can be at the level of speech, it can be at the level of the body. Rajasic tapas can be at the level of speech, mind, body. Tamasic tapas can be at the level of speech, mind, body. What is sattvic tapas? Sattvic tapas, he says in the next verse, 17th verse of 17th chapter, Shraddhaya paraya taptam. Tapaha tat trividham naraihi. 3 kinds of tapas. When done with Shraddhaya, when done with Shraddha, tapas when done with Shraddha. What is that tapas? Aphala akankshi hihi. Means you don't have phala akanksha. You don't have, Shankara here uses the word phalakanksha rahitaihi yuktaihi samahitaihi. You are composed with no expectation of results. There is no yearning, thirst. एक तड़प जो रहता है to know whether I've done right or wrong, whether it went correct, it went wrong, whether someone liked it, someone did not like it, whether that constant judgment that happens about oneself with reference to the outcome of the results also. We judge ourselves based on what the outcome of the results will be. A person who is doing tapas with Shraddha means when he is freed of this inner urge to verify the result, he is free of that urge and he remains composed. Tatvikam parichakshate. Such a tapas is sattvic. In fact, starts with sattvic, saying that there are 3 kinds of tapas, but when practiced with supreme faith by people who are integrated, means they have their alignment, free from the desire for reward, is sattvic. Then what is rajasic? Tapas, which is satkara, mana pujartham. And this is very popular in the world. Means you will go to any extent. You will do a lot of tapasya. You will do a lot of hard work to get mana, satkar, to become worthy of puja. Means people should worship you. People should look up to you. People should do your satkar. I don't know if there's a satkar tumhara kare, tumhara maan kare, tumhari puja kare, worship you, idolize you. They'll do lot of it. They'll do all that. Put in a lot of effort. Because that putting willful effort is tapas. But for what end? They're doing it for the end of gaining mana, puja, etc. Dambhena cha eva yat. Also, they've got dambha. Dambha means arrogance. uh, performed hypocritically. Here it said performed hypocritically to win respect. This dambha cha eva yat, the one who does tapas hypocritically to win respect, honor and reverence, is kriyate tat iha, वो जो करता है ये सब, इह प्रोक्तम रजसम talam adruvam. He is not a dhira purusha. He is not committed to his growth. He is wavering. He is faltering. Adruvam. He is not focused. Chanchal hai wo. Adruvam. Kabhi haan, kabhi na, kabhi karna, kabhi nahi karna, kabhi. So he goes both sides. He is not consistent. So he does sometimes correctly, but sometimes he slips into this kind of tapas. So sometimes he does sattvic tapas, sometimes he slips into rajasic tapas. Sometimes he does this for his own sake. Such a tapas is called rajasic. And tamasic, moodha grahena atmanaha yat pidaya kriyate tapaha. Moodha grahena, wrong thinking, moodha buddhi se. Avivekena nishchayena, Shankara says. Without thinking, without discerning. What do? Yat pidaya, you cause pain to yourself. Tapaha kriyate, in the name of tapas. तुम अपने आप को पीड़ा दे रहे हो. Which I said you see a lot of places in the name of religious activities. When you go to religious places or you go to tirthas and you see so many of them doing tapas, but in the way of giving themselves, they're torturing themselves. Self-torture. Tapas. A tapas in which they're hurting themselves. Pida dena apne aap ko. So even if you are, while every tapas will have some sacrifice involved, will have some pida involved, but tamasic tapas is in the form of only doing pida to yourself. Paraha. Yotsyar. Anartham. Means paraha yaha utsadanartham. Paraha to the other. Utsadanartham, hurtful, destructive. Means you are self-hurting and to others you are destructive. In the name of tat tamasam udaratam is the example for tamasic tapas. So you see, tapas can be, tapas is in short a very willful practice of understanding which of your senses have the capacity to topple your pursuit towards the higher. And you take controls over your own instruments, means your own body, your own senses, your own mind. So in the Ratha example, why is Krishna shown as the Sarathi? If Sarathi is intellect, buddhi, thinking capacity, correct thinking capacity, discerning capacity, Krishna is equated to Sarathi. That means when your buddhi is completely clear and you have your reins, which is the mind, which controls the senses, and the senses have in themselves the nature to only be outward. They can never be aiding the mind to know itself. Mind will always get carried away by the senses outside. So whatever the person undertakes to know himself as who she is herself, that is called tapaha, means going against the natural flow of the senses, conserving the dissipation that they do because they take you to areas which are redundant, which are no use. Further, when one gets into more Vedanta and clarity in it, you realize all that the senses will take you is only to realms of action. And action itself, as I just said, that question came up, should all or action. The question was from actions cause bondage. So for freedom, you must give up actions. So the questioner said we should give up all questions. And Krishna answers to say, only actions that purify you should not give up. Which means tapas is necessary for self-growth, in the direction of self-growth. This, as I said, one of the forms of tapas is Brahmacharyam. Tapas can also be at the level of just ahar, eating that food which is conducive to keep the mind quietened. Because food directly, there's a whole Ayurvedic medicine that comes out from showing us. If we have some time, I don't know if I can compile it, I'll try and compile it, otherwise I'll just mention it as I'm mentioning now. The entire body is made up of food. Your blood, your vessels, your everything in the body is actually product of food. So the kind of food you eat is the kind of body you have, and the subtle part of that food makes your subtle body, your mind, antakaran. So you see that in our country, specifically in the Vedic Dharma, what has now become popular as Hinduism, but in the Vedic Dharma, this study that we are doing is a liberal study. When a person gets to know this, he himself comes up with measures to control himself. So if he has a weakness for food, if he eats any kind of food, he realizes that there are certain kinds of food which agitate the mind, disturb him, they keep the mind a little volatile, which are called rajasic foods. All our, lot of them. So when a person focuses more on, say, food, thinking, exercises, because he knows, etc. So you have so many schools of thought and religions that have emerged and can still continue to emerge from the Vedic thought. These are the principles. Now, Jainism, for example, has completely taken tapas at another meaning. Buddhism takes tapas at another level. They are more tapas-oriented religions. The principle being the same. They live with tapas. Idea is that they are trying to know the truth. Whatever name of the truth they give. So what really is Shastra telling human being is that if you leave your life to your senses, you are the Rathi. If you leave your life to your senses, then horses and their sense objects are always going to be pulling each other. The sense objects will pull the senses. And in a human being, the verse is, Vedanta says, in lack of knowledge, Atma Vidya, you will also feel the push from inside to get some temporary happiness. Some happiness is better than no happiness. So what happens is between the pull and the push, the senses and the mind keep getting stronger and stronger in the individual. So you remain extroverted. Paranchi khani means extroverted. Your pursuits remain in the external world. And they cannot help you to know who you are. So the wise person, he chooses to make his lifestyle in such a way that he is managing his senses without his mind, means that monam in the mind must remain. So in other words, supposing I decide today I am going to do a whole month fast. Big fast mein, I'll do a whole month fast because my weakness is food, supposing. Example. Supposing it's food and I say, okay, Adhik Maas, I'll do it. But heart to heart, the whole of Adhik Maas, I just about managed because all the time my mind on its own was going to food. I don't know what happened to some of you on Karwa Chauth. It starts in a particular way. By the evening, what happens to mind? What is Karwa Chauth? Or any fast for that matter? You see, every aspect of activity in the Vedic vision, in Hinduism, when you understand how beautifully they integrated it to your growth. And any and everyone could do anything and everything and nothing. You have the freedom. You still have the freedom to choose your own lifestyle, which is right for you, because the push from inside only one person knows. So supposing I extend myself for 1 month, but I am a disturbed, agitated person, I don't have to do it for 1 month. Shastra says you do it for 1 day. If it's 1 day is too much, Shastra says do it once in a while. If once in a while is more than also very disturbing, it says just take name. Shraddha is the important part of your tapas. Tapas done without Shraddha will fall into Rajasic and Tamasic category. So Shraddha based tapas, that, and you have full freedom, and that's why I said there are many layers and varieties of tapas over there. Each one can be joyfully bringing tapas in their life to their capacity, and all will still walk towards that plurality, is still functioning towards one goal in their own ways, because the Siddhant, the fundamental, is still incorporated in life. So with this, I'm hoping that I think the question is answered fairly comprehensively, and I hope it is clear also. In this tapas only comes that word also, like Brahmacharya is one of the forms of tapas. So tomorrow we will take up the example as Brahmacharya. To complete this, then you will start to hopefully understand how many types of tapas there are. Though Shastra may just enumerate these as guidelines, these are guidelines. What we are doing is studying the guidelines, understanding the guidelines. Once we understand it, we have the freedom, still the freedom to live by it or not live by it. And this is where the entire Hindu culture is. Hindu culture has the freedom. There is education of this life, and there is freedom in this life to choose your own path. Whether you want to move towards the higher of your own being. And in this context, one more thing I should not forget to mention, it is said in some other book, but I'll just remind it here. Because tapas can be varied in many ways. In the Gita also, he says it in one place. Of all the various kinds of tapas, there is jnana tapas, which is the highest, which is the best. And jnana tapas means once you have got this viveka, vairagya, now we will start shataka sampatti. Shataka sampatti is actually what you will realize is mano nigraha, indriya nigraha, first two, shama, dama, adi. So sensory controls, mental control, then titiksha, endurance. So you see, all of them will go into tapas. So I'll stop here before it and we'll continue tomorrow with Brahmacharya question. Trying to integrate. How much I can do, I am not sure, but we'll try our level best. With this, I'll just end the class first. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhave And just as a reminder, of course, one of the blessings is the question answer session this week. This gives you enough time to finish. Some of you also wanted extra time to finish the Viveka and the Vairagya synopsis. It would be nice to keep on doing it. When you have the choice, we realize that we are on the right side, easy side. The Shastra Vidya only consolidates through repetition. So however joyful it will be to hearing, your own effort to holding it in your mind, one of the ways is this. It doesn't make you studious, it doesn't make you intellectually powerful. It only makes you understand what you've understood and how much you don't understand. And trust me, till today, I may do the Gita the 10th time and I will still relearn when I do the 11th time. Because the Shastra is so layered in that sense that every time I unfold one layer, another erupts. And I can only unfold one layer when I have understood the previous layer. And that at that point looks up, बिल्कुल समझ में आ गया. And जब लगता है बिल्कुल समझ में आ गया है तो तुम लगा, thank God, now I can move on. And then the minute you move on after a few months, when the same thing comes up in another context and you realize, oh, this was just about bit of an understanding. And then you start redoing the whole thing and you realize, oh, another layer peeled out. So that onion example is a perfect example. You go on peeling, you go on peeling, you go on peeling. And what remains at the end in Vedanta is, the more you peel off, what remains at the end is your core self, who you are. Till then, you're only learning and relearning and relearning and relearning. And in that relearning, you're just removing what you've not understood. So this is just an example. I'm going to keep it voluntary because my past experience tells me that any amount of telling anyone to do anything, that never works. So it is always going to be voluntary. There is no expectation from anyone. This is said only with the idea that you may understand why it is necessary for you. You still have the choice to do or not to do. That's your freedom. Each one learns in their own way. If you have your own way of learning, nothing like it. So, idea is to learn. Yeah. So tomorrow we'll do Brahmacharyam.
Diji, I have a question to ask.
Yeah, 1 minute. Let me just. Yeah.
So, Deepti ji, you said that if someone is saying, if someone is saying something hurtful to you, right? You do not go and either respond to that person, and nor do you get mentally disturbed by that, right? How do you get to that point where none of this happens to you?
Tapas.
Because ultimately, you can choose not to respond, right? But your mind is always fighting that battle. Though you try saying, okay, we will not wish for anything. It's okay. They must be right in their own grounds. Something of that sort, right? You try to become that person and see from their perspective also.
Which is what technique?
Vairagya.
Pratipaksha.
Yeah.
So you are right. You keep doing that, Pratipaksha. You have to start seeing, as you keep gaining more knowledge and clarity, like this verse said, the one who wants to know the higher alone will be the one who will sustain it. So if your goal is not up to that point, there'll be struggles all along. So sometimes you will succeed, sometimes you won't succeed, but then it's better than having never done it.
But won't the other person take you for granted, Deepti ji, because you're not going to respond? And they may try to hurt you further.
That is your choice. That is why this path is not walked by everybody. Because the minute I say the other person will take me for granted, I've already given the power to another person. Means I depend on the other person. This is what Vedanta is telling us. That if you're going to give somebody else the power to tell you, to even take you for granted or not, it's your independence. If they take you for granted and you are not affected by it, you are free of it. They are not taking you for granted then. They can only take you for granted when you are feeling disturbed that they take you for granted. How many things have we taken for granted? Who's complaining about it? Oxygen we took for granted. When are we complaining about it? Water we took for granted. In Brahmacharya portion tomorrow, if I can cover it, I'll try and cover it. But it talks about all those disciplines, and in one of the places to emphasize, in Tapas also, I just read it somewhere very recently. In Tapas also, one of the examples of tapas comes in Shiva Puran, and in Shiva Puran he says, between some stories it comes and it says the greatest form of tapas is digging wells and lakes and things like that, because water is fundamental to all life being. Now he gives this example in the form of a tapas, and if it's a fundamental to all life beings, now see from our standpoint, have we not taken water for granted? Is it possible to live without not taking for granted? So if someone takes us for granted, has someone ever turned back and told us that you have taken us for granted? And trust us, there must be some people for whom we are taking them for granted and they're not complaining about it to us. It's a very two-way cycle. It's not possible that it can only be one way. Yes, but I would still say it's a very thin line, and each person must decide for them, because it can also become abusive at some point of time. It can also really be wrong at some point of time, where it will be wrong to put up with it. In the name of tapas, that's why Hinduism, it becomes very difficult to follow, because there's so much freedom and liberality कि कुछ do's and don'ts अगर clear हो कि भैया हर Sunday जाना है या हर, then it's different, you're following a religious life. But here it's left to you to decide whether you want to do it or not do it. So if someone's taking me for granted, it is up to me to choose, is this my line or not? And respond back. But when you respond back, remember, if you're responding back with an intention not to hurt another and speaking the truth. See, sometimes there will be people who are around us who are just taking you for granted. There is no doubt about it. I mean, like I say, for me, the neutralizer is, I am very certain I am taking many people for granted who have never turned up and told me that you take us for granted. So I just resign to that fact कि अच्छा है, जब तक वो चुप है तब तक अच्छा है जी, तब तक मैं भी क्यों किसी को बोलूं कि हाँ, you've taken me for granted. Well, let it remain like that, because if I upset the cycle, then if I point a finger to someone, there will be a finger pointed back to me also. So these are part of, is life to be lived within these things. These are insolvable, is what Vedanta points to us so much that एक दिन आ जाता है जब हमको दिखने लगता है कि ये तो सॉल्व ही नहीं हो सकती कुछ बातें. संसार की कुछ बातों में सोल्यूशन ही नहीं है. And जब वो समझ में आ जाता है कि इनका कोई सोल्यूशन ही नहीं है, then there is only one solution left. What is that solution?
Live within. Try happiness within.
Just
try to find
gracefully. You'll find all these things now in Shatak Sampatti. That titiksha, when it comes, titiksha is enduring pain with pleasure. जो भी दुख है या जो भी दुख के कारण बन रहे हैं, endurance with joy. अब ये सब क्योंकि मुश्किल है इसलिए ये तपस है. अगर ये आसान होता तो ये तपस क्यों होता? ये तो हो जाता, सबसे हो जाता, natural होता. And my favorite, one of my best pratipakshas is, once I tried learning piano because I was very fond of piano. You have those idealism, when you study in English schools and all that, you only see all those, you don't see harmonium, you see pianos in your environment. And so you also think you must also learn to play piano. And when they said, and first 1 song, 2 songs, and then it was all Hindi, I said, I'm not learning Hindi songs, I want Western classical, to learn piano, I want to learn Western classical. After a few days, I just said, oh my God, so much time, energy it takes just to play a few notes. Just to play a few notes. And how much am I not doing what I want to do otherwise, just to play a few notes? Now, what did I have to do at that time to play? I must have a very strong desire to really learn piano for me to persevere that. That would have become tapas. But I had a strong desire for something else. So my giving that up has not been painful. It doesn't give me, I have not missed it so much. I enjoy when someone plays it. I like to hear piano music, I love it, I'll enjoy it, but I will not, no, I'm sorry, I will not do tapas for piano. Because what is it meant for at the end of it? In the same way, you start weighing your gains and your loss, बहुत कुछ अंदर अपने आप, which cannot be taught. How you digest the knowledge will start expressing in your way you think, which you will realize and recognize has come from your teaching without someone teaching you that particular thing. That's the joy of Shastras, these that you're learning now. कि कैसे हमारा अपना दिमाग अपने आप ही शांत हो जाता है, because you just realize what have I lost at the end of it. Another of my best is if someone takes me for granted, and trust me, we all have such people around us. It's not that it would happen only to one, because it's universal things. Therefore we know कि हाँ अगर हमसे कोई हो रहा है तो हम भी किसी के हो रहे होंगे, वो बोल ही नहीं रहे होंगे, बस ना हमको लग रहा है तो किसी और को भी लग ही रहा होगा. These are universal things. So when you see this happening around you, I just tell myself, okay, good morning, good night. In between morning and night, just a few hours, and that also very few minutes with someone who's taking you for granted. Rest of your whole life can be with someone else also, no? How many people are taking you for granted according to your assessment? One or two, and they may be the closest. So what? Were they there before they met you in your life? You know? God knows how long this life is for who. Which day is the last day? So for many, and best exercise at that time is really what Shastra says is just go on doing Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. Everybody has to grow in their time. In this process of self-growth, nobody can make another person understand. So however much I tell another person, listen, hello, you're taking me for granted. Unless वो 10 बातें मुझे वापस सुनाएंगे, वो मानेंगे नहीं कि they're taking me for granted. They'll first justify. You think wrong. I'm not taking you for granted. See what all I have done for you. अरे बाप रे, इतना ज़्यादा आधा दिन वेस्ट करना इन बातों में. अच्छा है ना, he takes you for granted, she takes you for granted. Good, go. What do they want from you? Just give it because it has no value. So unless and until you begin to see the real value of real things, that people take you for granted, ये नहीं होगा तो कोई और होगा. Can you stop people from taking you for granted? Will it ever happen that there'll be nobody who takes you for granted? And my favorite example again, which really applies to every one of us. How much for granted have we taken our parents? Completely for granted. Till today. हम इतने बुढ़े हो जाते हैं सब, और हमारे parents उतने ही हम, and in those days they became parents much younger than now they become. So the generation gap was like 18, 20, 22 years. 22 years older to you has become your parent, and just because they're your parent, now look at the way we take them for granted. They must be there for everything and anything at the expense of everything of theirs and anything of theirs. Ho gaye na for granted.
Yes.
Is that a justified relationship? To us it says, it is very justified, but ask the parent. It's not always justified to take your parent for granted. And my worst thing, this is my last and then we'll end here. If you want the class on Brahmacharya, then I must end here. Which is my last, the one thing that we have most taken for granted is this knowledge. We do not appreciate the worth of this knowledge. It's only when many of us are just about to die, and by some grace, some anugraha, I say in life, कि ये ज्ञान हमारे जिंदगी में आ गया है. Before death, just before our death, we realize what is it that we have gained and what is it that we have lost. Because while we are living, we are taking everything for granted.
Yeah, ultimately nothing we're going to take.
Exactly. We are taking life for granted.
Yeah, I agree.
So what are relations? And it's a continuity. When you learn the next part of it and you realize that our subtle bodies don't die also, still knowledge is there. अब ये relation यहाँ खत्म हुआ है, फिर से एक जन्म, फिर से relation, फिर से, अरे, when will this process end? When will you end taking for granted? It'll never end. So what is a wise thing? Maneuver, duck sometimes, ride some. That high wave and low wave. All life's challenges are like that. If it's a high wave, what do? For those who surf, for those who know surfing, when there's a high wave, what do? You duck. When there is a low wave, what do? You rise. And that's called surfing. You surf in life. You just have to identify which is a high wave and which is a low wave. And you have to identify your skill as a surfer. How much can you handle? What can you handle? Bas utna hi you can do, no? We are all limited beings at the end of it. theek hai. It's okay. As long as you keep your attention. See, what should be valuable to each one of us? What should be worthy of our time and our life? If our attention remains on that, then these things, thoda sa agar dukh de gaye, kabhi kuch ho gaya, it's okay. Just take them in your stride, and part of your growth of forgiveness. It's okay. Some people take me for granted and they don't see it elsewhere. And we can't change anyone. We can't. So all these things fall into place automatically. Idea is you should stick to what is your purpose of life. What you think is valuable for your life. What you think you will not regret when you die. Because death is our certainty.
Yeah, the only constant.
Exactly, the only constant. Like change is the only constant. There are two constants. So
I
death is a
agree.
part of that change. So it's change that is the constant.
Thank you, Deepti ji.
Better? Okay.
Hari Om.
Thank you so much, Deepti ji. Hari Om.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dipti ji.
Thank you. All the best, everyone. See you tomorrow.